Everybody, welcome back to the Insiders Lounge. Today we have another special episode and another special guest, Devin. Thank you for joining. Normally with our format, I get you to introduce yourself first, and then we'll kind of dive into the episode. But one of the key things that I know we spoke about last time on the call that I thought was an interesting way to start the episode, and then we can kind of dive into a bit more of your background. But I remember hearing that your first contract, your first pro contract that you had, you actually negotiated yourself, and through the entire process, you were kind of, I guess you could say, alone in that process. I'm sure you had family members and so on around you, but really throughout that process, you were alone. Can you just talk us through that to get us started in the episode? What was it actually like? I know, especially nowadays, it's pretty common for most players, I would say, to have an agent, unless they're more in kind of a senior position in their career. But this was really early days. So I would love to hear more about the situation, kind of the development around it, and then we can kind of dive into the rest of the episode.
For sure. So, yeah, I mean, for me, graduating college, obviously I was reaching out to agents more so for the connection aspect of it. But having really no background of, or any worth, maybe that is what they thought, that there was really no value to sign me at the time. So I just kind of went along the whole time, first couple of years without an agent, trying to figure out my own way, find connections, building connections that I'm sure so many other players do as well, reaching out to people, whether it's on Instagram, LinkedIn, finding ways to just get some type of opportunity. So when it came to actually signing or getting the opportunity for my first pro contract at the Stars in the U.S., that was something that I did by myself. Again, the process is a little weird because there's no really middleman, so you kind of see the value of, talking to the owner themselves or the GM, who was the same person at the Stars. But going through that process was kind of an eye-opener for me, just to see kind of how the process was, was able to figure out some things that, how to navigate that world. I think that was a skill that I thought would be important for myself going on later in life. Like, I'm going to have to negotiate salaries and all that type of stuff. That's something that is valuable for the rest of my life. So for me, it was a good experience just to put myself out there and challenge myself, see if I could do it. But it was one that I think the biggest drawback of not having an agent in the beginning was more so the connections part of it. So just going through the process of figuring out, what the value was for a player like me, right? So like, where was I even going to start when I was negotiating the contract? I was like, obviously I would like a lot of money, but like, where's my value actually at in terms of, the rest of the league, or just in general as a player in the league? Because in NISA or USL at the time, when I was first joining, I didn't really people didn't talk about that type of stuff.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you.
There's no really now there's a little more transparency within the league because of the Players Association. But for me, not having any professional experience, not really talking to people, because maybe it's a little bit taboo at time to talk about, hey, how much are you making? What's a reasonable salary? Like, what should I be asking for? So that type of thing was difficult, just kind of figuring out, gauging what was acceptable to ask about, because I don't want to go in there and ask for a crazy number. It's like, dude, what are you
just laughing you off? Yeah,
this is not what the situation is. But yeah, so that was probably the most difficult part. But in the end, I think was able to go through it and learn from it. Learned a lot from it.
Yeah, I think as we kind of get into your career, it's pretty fascinating. You've had quite a unique journey. I think we could say from Sweden to the NISA level, also at USL. I think a unique pathway that many are not expecting coming out of college, I would say. I think let's take it back, like I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, growing up in, I believe, Chicago, right? Yeah. Talk us through growing up, kind of your soccer career, but also your personal life at the same time, kind of the encounters that you had growing up. And then we'll get into kind of that first stage of moving over to Sweden early on, and then more into your career and so on.
For sure. So like I said, grew up in Chicago. I played for the Fire Academy growing up, eventually played for the Soccers for kind of like my last couple years of high school. That being said, the academy was still around, but it wasn't as big of a deal as it is now today. Like, I still played high school soccer, crazy enough, because I grew up playing with a bunch of guys that, I grew up with, soccer with them for so many years. So played high school soccer, which maybe worked against me a little bit when it came to find colleges to go to, because, still at the time, academy is probably more ranked a little higher in terms of the quality of soccer and that type of thing. But nevertheless, was able to find an opportunity at a Division II school, Lewis University, which is outside of Chicago. Did 5 years there. Again, it was a lot of ups and downs at the time. That was like my first real injury in sports, where I tore my ACL my sophomore year. So that was kind of like a first big obstacle for me. And honestly, I would say that was kind of like, for me, the moment in soccer where I was like, okay, this is something I can't live without. Like being injured for 9, 10 months, however long the time was really like the eye opener for me. Like, I really want to do this and I really want to push even further in this. And after that year I got injured, an old coach of mine who's kind of like my mentor, his name is Brett Hall. He runs a program in Chicago called Bridges, which is still kind of around, but doesn't really do as much as it used to in the past. But what they did was they'd send a group of players out of college and send them to Sweden, Finland, Denmark, those countries. In the summer, they do like a 2-week trip and they try to get contracts, which later on in my story, that's kind of how I ended up getting to Sweden. But at the time, I was a sophomore in college. I was coming back from injury. I had some time in the summer. I was like, hey, can I tag along for this trip to kind of get some experience just to see what it's like? I need to get fit for the college season, so let's just see what happens, you know? And so eventually went over there, kind of got used to the level a little bit, used to the lifestyle, just to kind of get a glimpse of what it could possibly be. Opportunity after college, right? Just to kind of see what that would look like, especially going to a smaller school. Opportunities to go in the MLS, let's be real, it's not going to happen, you know? But an opportunity to play professionally or just play in another country was an awesome experience for me. So I was like, let's try it out and see what happens. So after that, finished my couple years in college. After college, no U.S. teams are calling my phone. I'm reaching out, not getting anything. As I'm sure so many other players experience, there's only a certain amount of teams and thousands of players after college trying to get an opportunity.
Before we move forward there, I want to dive into that process a bit more, because I think it varies very much from, you have players going on LinkedIn, reaching out to people that way. So what year did you graduate?
20.
Now I'm making you throw it back.
Yeah, it's crazy because my mom just sent me yesterday. My old college coach had like a varsity letter or something from college that he had kept in his office for so long and forgot to give it to me after I graduated, because I just went right after school. I went straight to like tryouts and everything, so I never picked it up. But I was 2018, 2019 was my last like year of school.
So kind of it's almost probably one of the worst times to transition going into the pro game with COVID and everything going on. But like, talk to us through that process. So how, like, when you say reaching out to coaches, like, was that just through mutual contacts that you had? Were you actually like going out, seeing people in the MLS space, like seeing if you can get involved, the USL, that sort of thing? And then where were those leagues at in that level? Like, did you have connections in terms of like players that you had played with in the past that were now in the league? Like, I'm curious that process for you and how that went.
Yeah. So again, like I said, my school was really small. So my first instinct was like, I asked my coach, like, is there any players that have played in professional level that maybe you can give me their contact, if I could reach out to them and see if we could go that route, just maybe a little personal side. There was nothing, nobody had really gone that route before. So I asked my coach, like, is there anybody that he knows maybe that could help me? And he ended up connecting me with an agency, like a combine type agency that, again, you pay a certain amount of money and, you know, you do a tryout, that type of thing. I was like, you know what? I have zero options. I'm just starting out. Let me just go to one of these things, see what happens. Crazy enough, I was picked to go to preseason with Charleston Battery from one of those like combines. I forget the name of the agency. Spent the whole preseason with them there in the championship. And this is like 2 weeks after I finished so maybe in February. So 2 weeks after, you know, school just started. I'm still technically in school, but I'm like, you know, screw it. Let's just see what happens.
Take what you can get.
Yeah. I'm not going to ask any questions. They asked me to be there. I'll go and see what happens. I ended up doing the whole preseason with them. Didn't work out in the end, but for me, it was like an eye-opening experience. Okay, I've never played at this level before. I didn't really know what to expect at the level, but I thought I did decent enough, and I was definitely able to compete. So that was like the first confidence boost, like, okay, this is actually something that I can see myself doing, and I fit in, right? Like, it wasn't like this dream maybe that I thought I had and I wasn't able actually to achieve it. It was like within reach. So I think that was the first thing for me. And then after that point, things went cold for a while. It was like reaching out to people on LinkedIn, messaging coaches on Instagram if I could find Instagrams, like just being that guy that just reached out to everybody, you know, like sending emails, sending texts, texting friends of friends, messaging other players on Instagram. to see if they would, hey, just can you give me your coach's information? Like, I know that's not how it works. Like, being in the situation now, that's not how it works at all.
I was going to ask your reflection on that. Like, how would you have gone about it differently if you could?
I think I would be more adamant about finding an agent possibly, but even saying that I did try. It's not like I didn't try to find an agent to help me out at all throughout the process. It's just having no history, having no really reputation. Agents aren't really as willing to help you out as they might seem, because they're taking a chance. They're putting in time and work to get you a tryout for a guy who really doesn't have any reputation. So they're putting their name on the line as well. So I understand that part. But I think the biggest thing would just be staying consistent with it. Like, whether it was on LinkedIn, maybe a coach or even an agent that did respond, be as respectful as I could to like see if they could give me any type of opportunity or connect me to anybody else that might be able to help. So again, it's a lot of the time it's a shot in the dark, but you never know what happens. So as I kind of continued to go along that process after college, it was like nothing's happening in the US. Summertime was coming around, and that was kind of when that trip to Sweden was going to happen for me. Like, that was like my backup option. I knew I had until January, until probably like June, July, where I could focus on trying to find an opportunity here. If nothing worked out, that was my backup. I'll go to the Sweden trip again and see if I could find something out there. Mm-hmm. That's kind of what connected me back out to Sweden the first time.
And then talk us through, like, I really want to deep dive into the Swedish side of things. So mm-hmm. what team, what division, and what is that atmosphere like? I know a lot of these trips can be a little bit glorified in terms of like, oh, we're going to play in Europe, and then you actually find out the details later on. So from your perspective going in, what did you think? Like, what were you expecting? And then looking back now, what were some of the realities that you're like, hey, look, this was interesting and it was a good learning experience, but maybe not what I should have gone through at that stage in my career. And now looking back, you're like, oh, maybe I could have changed this, that sort of thing. Not necessarily in a bad way, but just I want to get a deeper dive into like what that actually looked like.
For sure. So like, thankfully I was like introduced to this experience a couple of years ago prior when I went in college. So I knew this was kind of like a no frills trip. Like, you're traveling with the basic essentials. Like, we stayed. So we actually went to Denmark to start, and the club Soccers, they actually still have a relationship with this club in Denmark, HBQ, I want to say it's called. And so we stayed at their sister club's like field house, basically, where they just have kind of dorm living. We stayed in like the common area on like cots on the floor. Like, so this was like basic living. We like cooked for ourselves. There was probably like 20 of us that went. Some, again, in my position, were trying to get contracts. Some guys were in my position 2-3 years ago, were just trying to get experience at the level, kind of see how it was. So going over there, I knew what I was getting myself into, and that kind of gave me a little feel like, look, this is only here for 2 weeks. See what you can do, get out of it, and do the best with you can, So thankfully, we played a couple games, and the program has an agent that kind of helps teams know that there's players at games, and he kind of connects people to these teams in Sweden. But it wasn't like he was doing everything possible to get us contracts. He was like, look, I got this team. For me, he told me there was a couple options. I have this team in Denmark. It was maybe like 4th division there. He was like, I have a team in Sweden, this Division 2, which is still technically like the 3rd or 4th division in Sweden. You can go and see what it's like, and if they like you, and then we can kind of make arrangements for there. So I decided, I was like, you know what? The level in Denmark was decent, but I was like, let me just go try, see what it's like in Sweden. The team had just recently been promoted. They were kind of in a rough spot where they were fighting relegation. So it was like, I knew they needed players to come in, defenders especially. So like, look, I need game time. Like, that's the most important thing. I'm coming all the way over here. I need to play. I need to get minutes, get some video, just test myself out a little bit, So when it first happened, I was like, packed all my bags up from Denmark, went over to Sweden. They took a train over there. I got picked up in this old car. Like, this guy, it was like a farm town where I was at. So these guys, they spoke English, but it was very broken English, the first people that I was introduced with. And luckily there was this guy who ended up being my roommate who's from Armenia who spoke really good English, and so he kind of connected the dots for me in a lot of situations because he had been there for a week or two just trying to look for a contract as well. But my first experience going into the farm town, I was like, this is how I knew I was in for a long couple months. Like as soon as we were driving down the road, like 3-4 cows just stop in the middle of the street and just stop us in our way. So like I was like, okay, this is really happening. We're really doing this. And we pull up to the house. It's like this small 1-bedroom house that 3 of us were going to be living in. So it was a culture shock a little bit in the sense that it was a lot different from what I was going to be used to in the U.S. But even in saying that, I knew the level of soccer was going to be decent enough where I was going to be tested in a way that I hadn't been tested before. I was going to be in a different country. I was going to be playing against guys that, I think the Division II level in Sweden, it was a mixture of younger guys trying to make a name for themselves and some experienced veterans as well that were just kind of playing casually at the time. So it was a decent level, tactically more so than technically. The technical level was good, but I think there's still a higher technical sense or tactical sense than you would see at a lower level in the U.S. But for the most part, the experience was eye-opening for me in the fact that I really had to just like lock in and grind for like 3-4 months with nobody else there. Like nobody was watching. It was just me by myself kind of focusing on really what I wanted to do at the time. And that was 1, to make it to a higher level, or 2, come back to the U.S. and play professionally. So I think in doing that really helped me lock in mentally and get to that point.
I want to discuss, like, I think I had the question later on, but the mental side of things, because obviously to grow in terms of like your personal self, but also I think I would say in your soccer career, you kind of have to go through these valley moments of just like you mentioned there, like, what am I doing here? Like, what is going on? What have I got myself into? Can you talk to us, like, would you say that was some of the darkest moments in your career so far and personal life? Or did you have other moments throughout your career where you're just like, I'm lost, like, I don't know what the next steps are here, but I'm just going to keep plugging away?
Yeah, I think I wouldn't describe those moments in Sweden as dark at all. Like for me, it was kind of like rediscovering myself a little bit, like finding, like if I really wanted to do this is, in my mind, this is what I had to go through, right? And guys have different paths, guys go through different hardships, but for me, it was like, look, this is an opportunity. Like I was just really grateful for the opportunity, really thankful for the opportunity that I was like, let's just make the most of it. My team trained 4 days a week at night. Like some guys had full-time jobs still. They were still coming out and training every day, but it was still, I wouldn't say like a fully professional environment. I was like, look, I can train in the morning. I don't have another job. I'm training in the morning, train at night, 4 or 5 days a week. I had access to all the facilities. So for me, it was like, let's make the absolute most out of this and see what I can do in the time I was there. But the mental side of it, like just even going back to leaving, like at the time, my now wife, like leaving her after in a serious relationship, like leaving my family, leaving opportunities behind that could have possibly happened, but you never know. So this was like for me a concrete opportunity where I was like, you have to go and do something as opposed to just sitting around and waiting. And that was what my mentor Brett was always harped to me. It was like, look, things might come and happen for you, but the most important thing that you're not in college anymore is that you continue to play. Like some guys might play USL 2 and for them that might be the better opportunity. But for me, it was like challenging myself in a different environment where I knew I was going to be really uncomfortable at moments was kind of the big eye opener for me that I knew most people weren't willing to do that. And for me, that was something that I was willing to do. And I found that helped separate myself when I was in tough situations later in my career.
And then what, like, logistically does that look like contract wise? Like, how long is the season there? How long were you there for? And like breaking down the contract, like, do you have a goal bonus situation or like for the defenders, like clean sheet bonus? Like, how are those breaking down?
Yeah. So when I got there, they have like a midsummer break, I want to say in Sweden. So I got there like a week after that break. So they had played one game after that time. So there's maybe 12 to 13 games left at the time. Again, the club that I was at, it was run by like a couple guys that had just bought it. Like it was a local club that they just bought the local people would come to the games. Like they'd be grilling outside after the games. Like it was really a really cool setup. But again, it wasn't like a proper professional setup. That being said, like contract wise, they housed me. They gave me a car, which was manual that I couldn't drive. So luckily, my roommate was my chauffeur from Armenia, and he drove me around everywhere. But it's not like really had many places to go in the first place. And then I got a monthly salary, and they helped me like stipend for food as well. So like the setup wasn't bad. I had zero expenses. I mean, I just graduated college. I had no real responsibility. Like everything that I made was able to keep and use for what I needed to when I came back home. So that part of it was nice. There was no goal bonuses or any clean sheet bonuses. I wish I would have added those type of things. Again, maybe if I wasn't just so like, yes, I'll take the opportunity at the moment, I would have thought about those things. But at the time I was like, look, they're going to pay me some money and feed me and house me. I was like, let's just, yeah, cool, sounds cool to me. I really didn't care about the money at that time.
It's fair. It seems like an upgrade on college. You were kind of you were in college. You would just have basically most things covered. Now you're most things covered and a little bit extra.
Exactly.
I would say being in a small town environment, also you didn't have the distraction. Like we were just discussing Toronto, for example. Like you're in a big city like Toronto or Detroit now or New York or whatever that might be. You have those distractions of nightlife, of other things that you can go and do. Where in this situation, you just have the option to train. That's all you can focus on.
For sure. And I think that was a blessing in the end, like just to be able to have no distractions and do that. And obviously, I mean, being in another country, I have the urge to like travel, and like the train was not too far away, so I can go on days off and travel to different cities, stuff like that. Copenhagen was like an hour and a half or 2 hour train ride away, so I'd go there when I could, just because it was a really cool city and was able to do that type of stuff. But the fact that I was almost forced to just lock in mentally and physically was a blessing.
And then transitioning there, so if we start to transition into your time then at Michigan, what does that look like? Leaving that situation, how did that end off in terms of the relationship with the club and so on? And then where did you feel at that moment? Like, what were the next steps? What did you have in mind?
Yeah, so the season ended, and at the time I was set to come back on a couple of trials for some higher division teams in Sweden. At least that was what I initially thought coming back at the end of the season. Like the club, one of the directors of the club had, not promised me, but just told me like, hey, we have some opportunities of clubs asking about you. Like you came in and literally the team was third to last in the table. When I got there, we finished, I mean, they were bottom, getting relegated, and we won of the 10 or 11 games I was there. I think we won 8 or 9 of them. So like, and they had 2 or 3 wins in the first half of the season. So like we really changed, a couple guys that came in really changed things around. So people were taking notice like within the local area that had some higher level teams. So my initial thought was I was going to come back on trial for some of those teams and see what happened. But that next year is when COVID happened. So I kind of was sitting around. I literally have a flight booked back to Sweden. My parents were like, "Are you sure you sure you want to do this?" Like, I'm like, "Yeah." I mean, I had no problem being there last year, and at the time there was still no like really threat of going, because it was just like nothing was known about what was going on. Thankfully, I didn't go, because I probably would have been trapped or sent right back, but that was a whole issue in itself. So after that not happening, I'm back in the scramble of like, hey, what's going on? And that's kind of when everything shuts down. Like, nobody's really playing at that time. So I'm stuck at home with my 2 brothers. We're training every day, like just at random parks, back to the grind, it seemed like, when things kind of were seeming a little on the up. And I did the same combine that I had saw, or that Charleston Battery saw me, Michigan Stars, one of the owners was there. And I had kept in contact with him. He was promising, look, we're going to professional league. We're doing all this stuff. I'm like, okay, that sounds pretty cool. But in my mind, I was still like, I'm not really willing to settle for that just now, especially with USL opportunities on the table. Like, let me see those things out before we even go any further than that. But look, I stayed in contact. I think that was one of the things I was always adamant about doing, is like staying in contact with people, keeping the relationship in a good place, because if I do need opportunity, maybe they'll answer the phone and they'll give me the shot if need be. So thankfully that's what happened. I was like, look, I'm still looking for US opportunities, but are you guys training? what are you guys doing if I can come in and train with you guys while we continue to look for things? Because their NISA was shut down at the time as well. So I waited a couple weeks or months. This is probably now June, July-ish again, where I was like, look, nothing's happening. I need to come in and see what I can do. So they bring me in, train with them for like a week or two, and then I was offered another contract with them, which I signed because I was like, look, again, you need to play games. You're only as good as your last game in my mind. So you need to be playing minutes. And again, this is the opportunity to play in the U.S., somewhat close to home. So there was a lot of pros to it. But after leaving like the opportunities in my mind in Europe, where I was like, that's still something that I wanted to, see out a little bit, which kind of, I have no say in it, but, it was frustrating to leave those opportunities behind, or at least in hindsight, to leave those opportunities behind, because you never know, what could have happened.
And in these stretches of like not knowing what's happening and you're kind of just figuring things out, seeing what's next, was there like, did you have did it start to creep in your mind like, hey, maybe this isn't it? Like, did you have outside influences starting to say like, hey, maybe you should start looking at going elsewhere? Like, I'm curious on that side of things. And then if it did, how did you like block that out? What was it? What kept you going? What kept you like, okay, you know what? I still have a chance. Let me just keep going. Let me keep going.
Yeah. Thankfully, like the people closest to me, my parents, my brothers, my now wife, like they were so supportive of me, like chasing this dream or chasing my goals and getting this done. So from them, it was like all support, which I'm so blessed to be able to be supportive of me. I think it was more like personally, like again, I'm at home now. I'm living with my parents. Like nothing's really going. I'm trying to send out emails. This is now where you're back in the sending emails phase, messages phase. Is like, is this really worth it? Like, I've got my degree. Like, should I start working? Is this really the end of it? That was kind of like the realization for me. It was like, is this going to be the end of the journey that I thought, was on the up to being something, special? So I think it was more of a self-doubt thing at times, but the people closest to me were really supportive in pushing me on to continue to, one, train every day, stay in shape, but also, be adamant that the right opportunity would come. I think that's something that I'm really looking back. It's like they easily could have been like, look, you're staying at home for free right now. We need you to start working, doing something. But I think they really supported me to get to the point where I'm at today. So super thankful for them.
Let's get into NISA. NISA to me is fascinating, especially the Michigan Stars and so on. But from the outside looking in, I would say it seems like a little bit of a mystery league, I guess you could say. Obviously, most people in the U.S. that follow soccer, you understand the USL structure, you understand the MLS. The European side of things is fairly understandable as well. But NISA is kind of interesting. It's got a lot of that local kind of an environment to it, almost like a USL2 structure in a lot of ways, but obviously on the professional side. Can you dive into like just giving the general fan in the U.S. an idea of what NISA structure is like? I know the season's fairly short. There's a few different interesting points to it. And then just what your experience was like. So you've gone from the college side of things. You've had this experience in Sweden. I would say a step up, and now you're coming back home, kind of getting used to things again, especially during COVID times. I'm sure it might have been even more chaotic than it seems to be. So I'm curious to hear from your end kind of the details of it all.
Yeah, I feel like NISA's just a mystery. Even to this day, it's like you don't
Still
really know.
For you, even. Yeah.
You don't really know what's going on. But I think, thankfully, at the time, like there were still some reputable teams in the league. Like Detroit was still in the league, Chattanooga was in the league, Oakland Roots were in the league. So like there were still some names at the time that was like it had just started officially. So that was kind of like the draw. Like there was still promise of that it could be something, what it was trying to be, I guess. And at the time when I joined, it was trying to be an independent competitor of the USL, where fans had a voice, owners had a bigger say in how things ran. I think where maybe it didn't hit for us as players is the lack of structure in terms of pay, lack of structure in how teams traveled, like the living conditions, salaries, all those things that maybe the casual fan doesn't really get to experience. They just see us going out on the field and playing games, which that's what we want to do at the end of the day. But there's so much more that goes on and behind the scenes that I think can distract us as players, right? So I think that's kind of where NISA, in my mind, didn't really hit the mark as a proper professional league. But then again, at the same time, it provided for me an opportunity to get to the point where I'm at too. So like, it was a stepping stone for me, and that's kind of how I always viewed it. Like NISA was never the final goal by any means, and I'm sure for a lot of players it's not the final goal. But like, I went into this like similar to Sweden. I'm getting everything I possibly can out of this, and that means going to Michigan Stars for a year and a half, and again getting out of what I had to. That's what I was going to do to try to find another opportunity. And again, in saying that, when I first joined the league around COVID time, the first thing like officially that we did was like a bubble tournament. Like all the teams went to, that was all the craze after after COVID. Like every league was doing like some type of bubble tournament. So we went to Chattanooga, Tennessee, all 10 of the teams at the time. We all played in like a in-league tournament, which was actually kind of cool because this is like the first time everybody's like out again and, everybody's in the same city. So my first impressions were like this league could actually be kind of decent. Obviously, some teams had bigger fan bases like Detroit and Oakland. Even Chattanooga at the time had decent fan bases to maybe grow the league a little bit more. But in general, there was a lot of, I would say the drawback was there were so many other teams in the league that didn't have the proper structure to support themselves to be a professional team. Although it sounds cool for some of these people, is like, we're going to start a professional team, but we have nowhere to play. We have no kit sponsors. We have nothing to actually support the business and keep it running, because that's what it is for a lot of these people. It's just burning a hole in a lot of these people's pockets. So that part of it is tough. So you kind of saw that as a player as well when it came to the travel, the living conditions, and the wages. So I think that was the biggest drawback for me. But again, it served its purpose for me,
Yeah, I think it's hard to look back at it in a negative lens if the reality is it was that stepping stone to the next stage of your career. Can we dive into some of those points? Like you mentioned the living conditions, the travel, the salary, and so on. Like, can we get into more detail? What does that actually look like from your side of things? And then kind of the transition, I guess you could say, to Sacramento and so on.
For sure.
Sorry, to Detroit.
Again, I was my own agent at the time, negotiating with the owner at the Michigan Stars. And again, there's not really any transparency from other players. Like everybody's just kind of happy to be there. Look, this is what some guys might say this is what I'm making. You don't know if it's true or not. But in terms of salary, it was like a base monthly salary for most people. I want to say in actual Michigan Stars, I got bonuses for wins. No bonuses for shutouts or anything like that, but it was a base salary, which maybe 20 to 30,000 at the time. Like I was doing still privates and coaching just to kind of help. Keep my lifestyle up a little bit. They provided housing, which it's even being generous calling it housing. We were, but just like the biggest thing was like the travel. So like we'd play a game in Maryland, we'd be taking like 2 Sprinter vans there, like a 10-hour bus ride, in a Sprinter van the day before the game. So it was like things like that was just really, really tough. Meanwhile, some teams in the league, they would cancel games because the team didn't book travel in time to actually get to the city before the game started. Like stuff like that would happen. And it was like, for me, that was it was more frustrating as a player because here we are, like everybody's trying to, I think everybody was similar to me, where like everybody wanted to use this as a stepping stone. But when things like that happen, now for players that are trying to get out of this league, people are looking down at the league like, look, this is not even a serious league. Why are we going to take this player serious? So I think that was the frustrating part from the player's perspective. It was like, there's only so much we can do on the field that doesn't negate everything that's happening outside the field with, the teams and the owners and all that type of stuff that was going on.
I really want to make this almost like a player guide for players. I know a lot of players listen to this podcast, whether they're in kind of the later stages of high school going into university, or they're in university going into the pro game. So to give a better understanding, the Swedish side of things, you're probably looking at what, a couple $100 a week sort of thing.
Yeah, a couple hundred. I would say at the $200-300 a week. Yeah.
And then you've got expenses covered, food, that sort of thing. So you're doing okay there. Then
Yeah.
I would say this is a step up. Look, you're back in the U.S. You're in a little bit of a comfortable environment. Was the payment structure fairly steady? Like, were you having late payments? I know that's a big struggle with players and so on. And then when were you paid once a month, once every 2 weeks? How did that work for you?
Yeah, that was never an issue at the club I was at. Like, we got paid first of the month, the whole paycheck for the month. So that was very standard. We were like basically contractors of his company, so it was like there was no issues with the payment at the Stars. But again, you're still dealing with, besides the payment, the outside factors of the living conditions maybe not being up to par, living with multiple people at the same place, stuff like that, where it feels a lot more collegey, and the fact that there's multiple people living in the same room with a bunch of guys in their early 20s, like just trying to play soccer, really, trying to grind it out. But when you see each other at the soccer field and you see each other at home, like, it's just you see the same faces all the time. It becomes frustrating. So that part of it is something that maybe people don't understand and notice, is that you need a little bit of separation. Something I've learned later in my career, like, you need some separation between on the field, off the field, and in your life, to be able to be successful on the field, I think.
And then managing your finances, like, what is that? So how old were you when you first signed for Michigan for the Stars?
24 or 25. Yeah.
Okay, so you're a few years out of university. What does that look like for you in terms of managing finance? Are you able to save any of that? Or are you just basically spending it through taxes? Like, I'm curious to hear kind of your mentality at the time and how you approached it.
I have a finance and economics degree, and I have an MBA.
Oh, okay.
So, like, I financially was probably a lot more frugal than I had to be, but I was like, look, I'm saving not for myself, and I'm trying to start build a family, all that type of stuff. So I was thinking, like, further down the line, even though I'm sure there was things that I could have spent a little more money on, like in terms of like keeping my body up to the higher standards, things like that. Maybe sacrificing a little more money back then of like quality of food, things like that might have helped me now that you don't really think about. But yeah, I was saving every dollar I can. Like I said, I was doing private training, some coaching on the side to kind of supplement my income a little bit more, just so I felt like, again, I wasn't doing it for the money. And even to this day, I would say I'm not playing for money. It's not really why I play, but it helps to know that you have some type of security when you aren't playing, that you can, have a living or have a life, outside of soccer. So, yeah.
And what was the influence of players in that environment? Because I think that can affect a player in many different ways, in terms of like off the field influences and what they have involved, and then also on the field in terms of developing your career and so on. So for you at the NISA level with the Stars, were other people in the similar mentality as you, where you're like, hey, we're using this as a stepping stone that we can kind of break through and make it into a different level? Or were there some players where kind of later stages of their career, they're just like, hey, we'll cash in whatever we can on the last few seasons of our career and then move on and try and figure something out? Like, did you have that kind of common build where you wanted to build and grow in your careers?
Yeah, I think most people were in the similar mindset of me, of like, look, we don't want to be here. We're not really happy with our lives outside of the field. Like, we want to get out of here. It's like, let's do what we can to get out of here. So obviously, like, the guys that I played with, I think that's one of the biggest saviors in every team that I've been with, is like, the guys in the locker room can make or break, the situation that you're in. And I think whatever was going on outside of the field with, the league or the ownership, stuff like that, like, the guys in the locker room were solid enough that we could support each other and push each other on. Because, look, like you said, everybody was trying to, or most people, I shouldn't say everybody, but most people are trying to achieve something greater than what the position they were in. So, and it came to, doing extra work at the facilities, or doing the weight training when we didn't have any type of staff to really support us with weightlifting, things like that early on. It was like, we're doing that stuff ourselves to kind of, set our standard to where we want to be, right? So that was that was the blessing in all of it, is that we had people that wanted to continue to strive to be somewhere higher. That being said, there's obviously always a couple guys on the outside that are like, look, I'm playing professional soccer. I can play for a year, say I play professional soccer and be done with it. Like that's what they wanted, and that's okay. Like that wasn't some of us, but that was what they wanted. So you get a mix, but for the most part, most guys were trying to achieve a little bit more than where they were at.
And then in terms of the contract, like if you look back now, obviously you have an agent, so you've established yourself. You've gone through many different contracts, so you kind of understand that process a bit better. Looking back, like if you're a first year kind of just getting out of college or university, you're going to a league like NISA or maybe nowadays like the USL League One, kind of just breaking into your first steps out of your career in college. What are some of those like key things to look at in the contract? Like, was there anything now that you look back, you're like, wow, I can't believe I signed that. Like I didn't realize that. Or is there anything where you're like, hey, that was something that kind of stood out to me in the early stages?
I would say, especially in the USL, it's like more of a solidified league, or like a NISA, or compared to like a NISA or maybe whatever league might be out there. The biggest thing for me is like the contract, and your first contract is a contract. Like, make sure legally you're not selling your life away, but like if somebody's willing to pay you, the term of the contract isn't like a 4-year contract, something crazy where they're kind of just holding you hostage. Like everything else, in my opinion, it should almost be like, take the opportunity if it's something that you think you can excel in. I think every opportunity that I took was more so something that I was like, I'm here, I can add value to the team, especially, and I can stand out, and I can get minutes, and I can grow from the opportunity, right? But like in terms of the contract, I haven't really been in, the contracts are so basic at those levels to me. It was like, this is your money, this is the term of the contract. It wasn't like there's any random clauses in there.
Yeah.
I don't think I haven't experienced. I'm sure if you're not getting paid, that's another situation. Like there has to be something in there to make sure if you don't get paid, there's some way you can make sure you get your money. But I think if they're willing to pay you and the situation is good for you, a good opportunity, then I think there should be no hesitation or reservation in taking the opportunity.
And then in terms of like an education, you just had me thinking there, like, is there anything in the university side of things? I don't even think now, like just from the conversations I've had, where they start to prepare you for this. Like, I feel like this could almost be a class for athletes to take where they can just kind of understand, look, this is basic understandings of how a contract works, how it works to be involved in a sporting environment at the professional level. Like, I feel like that's just not given to you. You kind of just are thrown into the deep end and you figure it out.
Yeah, I mean, it's not at all. And I was thrown in the deep end. Luckily, like I said, my parents helped me there within the business world. So they kind of dealt with contracts, whether it was like a job contract or looking at a salary or something like that, where they going back and forth, that type of thing with the owners. But yeah, I mean, that would be a big, especially now with all these athletes coming out of college, maybe not soccer so much, but like other athletes dealing with getting paid through deals and all this stuff. Like there needs to be a lot more education in terms of, the value that you have as a player and what you can ask for. Because at certain contracts, like I said, maybe I shouldn't say just be happy with what they give you, but like you have value, right? You do have value as a player to ask for certain things. And if a club actually wants you, they should be willing to compromise in certain areas. It's not like this is the contract, just take it and be quiet. It's like you do have value as a player, and you should hold true to what you think your value is. If the club doesn't see fit in that value, then maybe it's not the right fit for you. But if a club actually wants you, I think they would be willing to work with you in some type of capacity to get the deal done.
And I think in for your side of things, like I think almost got lucky in a sense where you had good environments, so you were a little bit easier in terms of, especially in the US side of things, the legalities of something that could go wrong are much more unlikely, where if you're in Europe or other parts of the world, it might be a little bit more difficult. Right. But I think in this case, you kind of, you structured it. But I think the mentality is key with what you're saying. Like, you knew, look, I just need this contract to keep playing, and I'm going to do whatever it takes. So as long as the contract's roughly okay at what I'm looking for, then I can kind of keep moving on and hopefully using that as a stepping stone to get to the next level.
For sure.
Can we dive into the transition then to Detroit City FC and the USL? Talk us through going from Michigan Stars, how that process kind of came about, how that opportunity came about, and then we'll get into some of the more interesting details in terms of your career now.
For sure. So yeah, like at the end of my contract of Michigan Stars, let's say 2022, 2021, 2022. It's all blending together. But my contract goes up, and I knew for sure at the end of the year, like this, I don't have any opportunities lined up just yet, but I knew like my time was done there. Like I can't put myself back there mentally, physically to go through that anymore. So I was like, look, I don't know what's happening, but I know I'm not going back here. So at the end of the season, said thank you, obviously did what I had, and, you know, I was set to move on. So luckily at the time, Detroit was in our league. We had played against them, our rival, quote unquote, at the time, with Detroit City, Michigan Stars. So it was like I played well against them every time. Let me reach out to Trevor to see if anything was possible, if they were looking to add any more players next year, what the situation was. Because I knew whether they were going to be a NISA or what the situation was. Like they had a fan base, they had a pro-ish setup at the time when we were first joining. So like they were on the right track to do something more legitimate than what I was in. So for me, it was like, look, let me just reach out and see. And me and Trevor connected on LinkedIn, I want to say, and I was able to get his number, that type of thing. So finally, I love the
LinkedIn connection. For me, I'm a huge LinkedIn nerd. So anyone that has any success through LinkedIn, I'm like, hell yeah, that is awesome.
So finally, 3 or 4 years later, it finally paid off, right?
Yeah.
I get a hit on LinkedIn, and I reach out to Trevor to see, you know, what the situation was, if they're in need of players. I end up having a conversation with him that I think goes well. So kind of thinking that something could possibly be happening here. And then this is maybe at the end of this NISA season, so like November, December-ish. Come to find out, which I don't know if Trevor knew at the time. I definitely didn't know that they were going to be moving to USL Championship the next year. So we had spoke prior to the announcement, so I'm thinking, oh shoot, I don't know if he thinks I'm just like a NISA player. Is he still gonna like have any consideration for me going to the USL Championship? So a couple of weeks go by, I'm kind of waiting around, see what's going on. I reach out back to him, and we have another conversation. I think it goes well. He's actually interested in bringing me to USL Championship. I'm like, hey, this is cool. It's happening. Like I feel like I'm finally taking a step in the right direction, and you know, I think from that point on, things kind of go organically in getting to the contract done. Again, I did this one by myself. So
I was going to ask that. That's why.
Yeah, did this one by myself. And bearing in mind the club is coming from NISA, the financial situation wasn't as good as I thought it was going to be. I was like, oh, shoot, this is going to be a nice pay increase. I'm thinking all these players in Detroit are making crazy money because, you know, all the fans are in the stadium. Like, they're selling out stadiums all the time. Surely this contract is going to be like pretty good. Fortunately, the contract wasn't the greatest, but again, my goal every year was either to make more money or to step up a higher level. So like for me, this was the latter of the two. I was going up to a higher level, which I was happy with. Again, if I have another good year, you never know what happens. So I ended up signing a contract. I think it was a year and an option. 1 year guaranteed in the option year, club option. Come into preseason, there's probably of the 20 guys on the roster, or 18, 20 guys on the roster, 14 of them were former NISA players. So like it was familiar, which made the transition a little easier because we were kind of all going into this coaching staff as well, like completely unknown to what we were getting ourselves into. Like we're like kind of all happy to be there, but also like, are we in over our heads a little bit? We really didn't know. You know, some of the experienced guys that came in and joined us had some USL experience to kind of ease us through the process a little bit. And I think we definitely surprised other people, but not so much ourselves, how we kind of handled that first year. But unfortunately, I want to say it was 19, 20 games in the season. I had started and almost played every minute of the season. And then, boom, I tear my ACL away at Indy that first USL season. So I was like, everything that I finally worked for, I was on the right track. Like I was having a really good year, hitting my stride in the USL Championship. Like I'm on the up, things are going well, playing every minute, and then boom, it just kind of all shuts down and stops, which is kind of like after this now being my second ACL tear, this was really for me like an eye opener. Like, damn, this is tough, because I knew how much it took to get to the point where I was at the second time around or the first time around. So now going back to the position I was at, physically, mentally, the shape I was in, everything to get back to that point was going to be even tougher than the first time around. So it was a big blow to me mentally and physically for sure.
I think you hinted at it there, which we'll transition to that. You mentioned kind of, look, I have to lock in a contract here. It's taking me up a next level. I can build on this, and I'll hopefully see something in the future. 2-year contract extension, I would say, is something that is pretty beneficial. Then in that case,
yeah.
Talk us through, like, I know that it's pretty common. I would say the 1+1 with the club option, that's pretty standard across the majority of the kind of lower leagues. Even in the MLS, I think some of the contracts are pretty standard with that as well.
Yeah.
What is getting that 2-year extension look like for you, especially now, getting married, starting to build a family? I think you always kind of had that mentality of like the long-termness of, look, I need to build towards my future. But what does that 2-year contract now look like in terms of the logistical side of things, of just like, I think even the mental kind of stress of like, okay, like I've got something here. Obviously I need to keep improving and so on, but I'm in a little bit more of a secure position for the first time, I would say, in your career.
Yeah, for sure. So like after the injury, I was even questioning if my option was going to be picked up. Thankfully, the club, like right after I get injured, told me they were going to pick my contract. So I had the peace of mind at that moment, like, okay, everything was going to be good. Fast forwarding to now, it was like, okay, a 2-year deal. I know I'm going to be the same place for 2 years for the first time in forever, really. Like besides going back to college days, like I knew I was going to be here for 2 years. So that part of it, having my wife here, like us being able to settle down, she can get her job where she knows she's not going to have to pick up and leave again, and like God knows when. It was like every time she's got a job, she's kind of had to pick up or move, that type of thing. So a 2-year deal, which made things so much easier for me to get over the line, because I was like, I know that one, the club sees me as a player that they want for 2 years, and secondly, like the balance of the life off the field goes so much further, especially in this stage of my career where it's like, I know I'm not going to be playing for another 10 years, but to know where I'm going to be at for 2 years, and to have the faith of the staff, have the trust within the group on the team. The guys, I talked about the 14 NISA guys we had earlier, there's probably still 7 or 8 of us around on the team still. So to have the trust of those guys as well is really special thing, and I'm super thankful to still be in Detroit.
So you're 29 now, right?
29, yep.
So 29 29 approaching 30. I think your birthday's in November or something, right? I think I saw that. What are the goals now for the rest of your career? Like, do you have things in mind, like in terms of a specific number of X or something in mind where you're like, hey, this is things I still want to achieve? I'd love to hear that kind of breakdown, and then we'll get into some of the other things outside of your playing career.
Yeah, so like every season I have like personal goals within the year that I try to achieve, whether it's goals, shutouts, duels. Those are kind of metrics I set for myself on a yearly basis. But I think like I'm at the point in my career, like something I really want to do is win. Like I want to win a title. I want to win a championship. I want to open. Like I want to win something. Like I'm playing and I compete every day. Like I'm a competitor naturally. So like for me, like the personal stuff is something that I always strive, that I have to just continue to push myself individually. But the biggest thing for me is like continuing to want to win something. And that was what kind of drew me back to Detroit and made me want to sign a 2-year deal here, is knowing that those ambitions align with the team. Because so many teams in the league are just happy to kind of, pay the players whatever and just show up and field the team, and that's okay. But like in Detroit, the standard is to really win and to win championships. And I think, we've been on that track last year. Kind of how we fell out of the playoffs was a little bit frustrating for all of us. So for me coming back was like, look, I want to win something, and that's on the number one on my priority list is to win something. And then in terms of like a personal goal, obviously younger in my career was like, I want to make it to MLS. I want to make it to the highest level possible. Turning 30, is that possible? Probably not, but like you never know what happens. So I think for me, continuing to get better is something that that's when I said I would stop playing soccer. Was when I feel like I don't have the desire to get better, but also I don't have the capability to continue to get better because I've only been playing at this level, 3-4 years now. So like I still have felt, even though I'm maybe older by my age, like my my age isn't a reflection of my playing experience. So I feel like I'm still continuing to grow on the field as well.
One thing I was going to mention is obviously the new USL structure. You're going to have two Division One leagues in a sense. You're going to have the MLS and you're going to have the USL side of things. Can we talk through like this promotion relegation? I'm curious. Like I've heard a lot of opinions from different league executives, from different club executives, but we haven't really heard a lot from the players themselves.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear your opinion on like hearing the first kind of news of it and what that meant for you guys. And then now, obviously, like we're less than 2 years away from this becoming a reality now. So is that exciting for you? Like it seems you have that competitor spirit. You want to win. You want to get a promotion. Like I think that adds all that hype to it. So I'd love to hear just your opinion on the situation and what that looks like from here.
Yeah, when I first heard it, I was shocked because I know there was kind of some rumors about it happening, and at one point in time, it was like they thought it was going to happen, but it wasn't. So for me, my initial thought was like, this is going to be really cool. Like in actuality, there's probably so many things that have to happen in between now and 2 years for it to become a real thing. But I think the promise or the idea of having a league where you're actually striving for something more than just, a championship. If the losers have to actually be held accountable for, having bad seasons, like it adds a different level of competition that the US hasn't experienced ever. There's no really league or sport where you're actually punished for having a bad season. So I think it brings another level of interest to the sport as a player. Like you have to hold yourself to a higher standard in terms of like things in the USO that are more standardized, like travel and player care. Like, okay, if you travel to an away game on a bus now and you lose the game, are we thinking, well, those are points that we can get relegated with now, right? So like those are things that maybe from the owners haven't really thought about before, but like if you're trying to stay in the top league, those are things that you have to really think about to take into account because every point matters at that when it becomes a promotion relegation. So I think it would be awesome for something like that to happen. But again, who knows? There's a lot of owners within the USO, I'm sure, that are kind of like, I paid money for this and I don't want that to happen. But that's kind of how things go. Change will be cool in my opinion.
Yeah, I think I'm in agreement on your end. I saw a Ben White video not too long ago discussing that he was like, he basically just says in the video, look, I'm not really that interested in playing football. Like to me, it's just a job. I'm playing for the money. Mm-hmm. I knew I was good at it, so I kind of continued doing it.
Yeah.
From your end, I would love to hear like your opinions and thoughts on that, but also he speaks on his other interests and things that he's gone into using the funds from his career. Yeah. So I would almost want to dive into things outside of the game. Obviously, we're constantly questioning players on, okay, what did you think of the last performance? What do you think of the next performance? All these same questions. But for you, what are some of the other things that when you're away from the game that you're focusing on? I know we spoke a little bit about your family, but other interests and things that keep you passionate just about living life in general.
Yeah. I mean, one of the big things, it's still soccer related, but I coach a lot. So one of the things I do, private training, I coach two like younger teams, U9 and U10 teams. So like that keeps me grounded in the fact that to them, like I'm just Coach Devon. They don't look at me as like a player at all. They could care less if I played. They think it's cool when they come to the game sometimes, but for the most part, I'm just a coach to them. So for that, I enjoy that a lot. Something I kind of dive into as well as real estate, like on that side of things. So my recent thoughts have been like combining the two of opening facilities, whether it's, training facilities, something along those lines, especially in an area like in Detroit where there's so much opportunity to start and dive into something like that. It's kind of where my mind has gone recently. But yeah, there's lots of thoughts and things that, the possibilities of ways I can go in those two sectors. And besides that, traveling, like I'd love to be like Ben White and be able to go on yachts and stuff on my off days and my downtime. But unfortunately, the USO salary doesn't allow for that. So again, like you mentioned, just hanging out with my family, hanging out with my wife, enjoying some downtime in Detroit, eating some restaurants, stuff like that. big.
Has Detroit become like a second home for you? It seems like you have a different connection to the city than it just being another spot where you're playing.
For sure. I mean, I've been here for five years now.
Yeah, with the NISA side of things as well.
Yeah,
Wow.
been here for 5 years now, so I've grown to love Detroit for what it is. I mean, I've seen the city, even in 5 years, I've seen the city grow so much. So when I say there's a lot of opportunity here, like there actually is so much growth happening. Like the team building a stadium, stuff like that that's happening around the city. You can see there's a little different energy, not just with our team, but just the city in general. So for me, it's been really cool to be a part of that side of things, and that kind of relates to me coaching and seeing helping the kids grow into the game and grow a love for the game is something that I've enjoyed passing on to them a lot.
I think this conversation could go all day. We have a lot to unpack. I'll do some quick fire questions to wrap up here so that we can be time efficient.
Let's hear it.
I was listening to Shaquille O'Neal on a podcast the other day, and he talked about his signing bonus and how he blew it. It's quite a common story that has been heard quite a few times, but basically goes through millions of dollars within like 24 hours, buys 6 or 7 cars, gives his mom a bunch of money, that sort of thing. I'm curious on your side of things throughout your career. We kind of broke down some of your contracts and that sort of thing. What was the I want to say dumbest, but I know it sounds a little bad, but just your dumbest financial decision or something that you were like, what the hell was I doing now that you're looking back at it? Or were you pretty straight? Because it sounded like throughout your career, you were pretty smart with what you were doing.
My biggest, I wouldn't say stupid by any means, but I just got married this last off season and we spent a lot of money.
Yeah, that hurts.
That was probably the biggest expense. Definitely not stupid expense, but one that I'll remember for a while. But yeah, something that wasn't too friendly to the pockets.
And in terms of inspiration, like I know even you mentioned real estate, you've got a lot of different interests in coaching, playing, that sort of thing. Where do you look for inspiration? Like I'm a big podcast guy personally. I read a lot of books. Where do you go for inspiration and just like general knowledge and growing in terms of the knowledge base of different things?
Yeah, I mean, growing up, it was, my dad was like a big inspiration to me, and he was an athlete himself, played college football. My mom herself was a college athlete. So those two were kind of like my big inspirations. And then as I got older, started reading books, listening to podcasts similar to you, like the mentality of somebody like Kobe Bryant is somebody that I kind of, have really tried to embody. Even somebody like Michael Jordan, who's, greatest at what he does, the daily habits and stuff. I think that's something that I've picked up through injuries and being later in my career is like the habits that you do, when you're not on the field or where you're not, playing, transfer so much to what happens on the field. So, making sure you're doing the stuff daily has been a big change in my mentality. So those two have really helped shape that.
Is there a daily habit or like part of your routine that you like find a little bit unique or people like almost question? Like I'm a huge like nerd for finding out, okay, what is the best routine? What time should I wake up? How much sleep? Like I've got a Whoop band now, so I'm always focused on that sort of thing. I'm curious from your end, do you have anything like that you're like really specific about?
Yeah, I mean, I have my Oura ring as well. So
there you go. Okay, so you get it.
Get my 8 hours in at least. Every night I like to do the Normatec boots. I try to do those at night. But yeah, my pre-hab routine in the morning is probably a bit much. The most people like I have the foam rolling, the heat pad. Like I do anything and everything to make sure I'm feeling before training, feeling good, because I know like it adds up. Especially the turf we play on out here is like it adds up. So for me, like I am really particular every day. Start my morning, have my yogurt, same yogurt every day. Like I'm very, very routine based in how I approach the days. Obviously when I'm not training and stuff, I try to relax as much as I can, but I try to be pretty routine throughout the week.
And I think sometimes what people forget is that's what you're being paid for. You're being paid to keep yourself at the highest level. So that doesn't just look like once you show up at the field, okay, now you're going to train. That starts from that morning. I think that's important. For sure. The last two here, what's the biggest life lesson? Like if you could give some knowledge to the next generation, what is something that you would pass on? It's very, very cliche, but like this is something that my mom grew up saying to me, and she still says to me all the time, is that everything happens for a reason. So when I was in Sweden or I was not making teams, they didn't make the Charleston Battery, it happened for a reason because I was meant to go to Sweden. When I was in Sweden, supposed to go back, didn't end up happening. Like
signing for the Stars, like that happened. Everything happened for a reason. I think for me, having the belief in myself and having the people around me that supported me allowed me to take that phrase in and like actually have belief in it, because in certain moments, bad things happen, like injuries and all that type of stuff. And you don't know the reason at the moment, but when it comes down to it, there is a bigger purpose behind everything. And I think for me, believing in that and living my day every day like that has brought me a lot of success in doing what I do. So yeah.
I love it. No, well said. The last one here, if you could sit down with one person, past or present, for a meal, who would it be and why?
That's a good one.
And you can split it up. I know some people go like personal life one and then kind of like sports and that side of things. It's up to you.
I would say translator included. I would either do like Kobe, and then I'd probably Messi as well.
And Kobe could translate.
Yeah, oh yeah, it's true. Maybe
he's got like 7 languages under his belt. He's a good one.
I'll bring both of them along then. That sounds good to me.
And the probably most elite mentality you could have from 2 people. So
for sure. Yeah, that would be a good interesting dinner, I'm sure. But yeah, that'd be cool.
And Devin, any last words? We're wrapping things up here, so I want to say from my end, I appreciate your time. It's great to have you on here, and I appreciate the openness to just discuss topics that aren't necessarily spoken about too often. And I'm sure it'll be super grateful from young players growing up, being able to hear from you and understand your journey and hopefully put that into practice in their own one. So thanks again from my end. And if you have any last words, then we can wrap things up.
No, yeah, thank you. Obviously, I've enjoyed speaking with you. And like you said in the beginning, it's like for me, saying these things out loud and kind of putting the words out loud helps me as an individual, take these things in that I'm saying and put truth to them. So I appreciate what you do as well. So I appreciate
Thanks again. Have a good one, Devin. See you later.
Talk to you.
Cheers.